Barry McGuire here for Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. It's the Monday main event. Every Monday we get together and talk about all things related to real estate, mostly about creative real estate. We have experts on in tax and insurance and financing and all other matter of things that you can think about. We have investors on talking about their deals. We're looking to improve your ability and understanding of creative financing, do creative deals. We also teach what we call focus workshops. And on May 7th and 8th in Calgary, we have our very first event in 3 long years coming up, our famous Rapid Cash event, 2 days, where we get together and really go over the details of creative financing, creative strategies like agreements for sale, rent to own, joint ventures, options, fix and flip, wholesaling, etc. So make sure you consider showing up on May 7th and 8th in Calgary, because everyone needs education and this is a great place to get it. So today on the Monday main event, we are going to talk about financing. We're going to talk about financing from a couple of perspectives. First, we're going to have a bit of an intro on the recent rate rises and the predicted future rate rises. We'll get that from our focus team experts. Are rates going up more? Seems like they might be. Last one was a 0.5 point. What does it mean if rates go up? What does that mean to us? Is it going to make the market collapse, or is it going to make people still stay on the bandwagon buying? What's it all about? And then we're going to talk about actually obtaining a mortgage for a creative financing deal, like a rent to own, like an agreement for sale, like a joint venture. How do those work, and how can we best be prepared to get that mortgage when it's when you really need it, when it's time to buy out your AFS or buy a rent to own to get it started. So without further ado, we're going to bring in our focus team for today. We've got Sean Impey, Ace Mortgage Broker and Investor. Sean is in the construction industry. He's a project manager and a consultant, and a huge amount of experience in organizing big projects, and has been investing for a lengthy time. Started out as an investor, and when he retired from, look at that, got the hands up. When he retired from being in the construction project managing side of things, he is now a registered mortgage broker, and he helps lots of our students with financing. We also have Dan Heon. Dan Heon is in that same boat. Dan, do I remember you were a heavy duty mechanic? Is that what you were?
Yeah, about 26 years ago.
26 years ago. So Dan knew that having motors dropped on his fingers was not a way to succeed. And so he joined the Rain Group. He did other meetup groups, started investing, has a big portfolio, and is also a mortgage broker of how many years experience for you, Dan, on the mortgage brokerage side?
21.
21 years. Got his own company?
Yeah, I'm feeling old saying that. But 26 years ago, you were my real estate lawyer, Barry. And when the banks told me no, you and I had to go figure out this thing called creative finance. Yes.
And we were doing it a long time before we turned it into a more of a mainstream thing that it is now. So we've been doing it a long time together. So both Sean and Dan have impeccable credentials. And then we have the delightful Andrea Workington, who is a whole bunch of things. But I don't think, Andrea, you're not a mortgage broker, are you?
Not yet.
No, but not yet. Not yet. Andrea will probably add it to her list. She acquires qualifications like nobody I've seen. And Andrea has a big portfolio, went from being a police person in Vancouver to Red Deer to buying properties on her own to joint venturing when she ran out of money to being a registered realtor and a property manager and a developer. And she is now raising money for some of her developments using approved capital raising methods. So Andrea has done a whole whack of stuff. around the financing side. Andrea, did I catch it all, or is there more to add?
Yes. I now have my own mutual fund trust, so I'm not a mortgage broker, but
Right.
now dealing with exempt market stuff. So
Exempt markets. So that is a way to raise capital that Andrea has gone through. It's fairly expensive to do it. It's time consuming to do it. But on the other hand, you can legally go out to the exempt market and attract capital. And we've had Andrea on the Monday Main Event talking about her mutual fund trust. So you might want to search in YouTube for that edition of the Monday Main Event, because it was really interesting about what she had to do to go through it and why she did it and how long it took. And everybody's talking about raising capital. Go watch that video in YouTube of Andrea. All right. Phew. So today we want to talk about financing, recent rate changes. We started with 1/4 percentage point. The last raise last week, I think, was 0.5 percentage point. The bankers, now that they've taken steps to raise, and now that inflation is rising, they all seem to be not afraid anymore of talking about raising rates, and they kind of have the bit between their teeth, and they're telling us, I think, without saying on this day we're raising rates another 0.5 point. They're pretty much saying on this day we're raising rates another 0.5 point. So Dan, let's start with you with the rate rises. What do you think that's going to do to the real estate market? Is it going to slow things down? Is it going to speed things up? People want to get in before it gets higher. People don't care because they want to buy. What's your perspective?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we need to kind of all take a look at is we're in a very uncertain, kind of tumultuous time right now. I mean, we've got things going on in Russia. We've got COVID just kind of, wrapping things up, and hopefully, that stays away for a while and no more lockdowns. And then on top of that, we've got supply chains and the issues that brings, and the inflationary, demands on increasing prices there. On top of all of that, we've got a bit of an economy trying to move ahead. And as you point out, real estate is, almost 1/3 of the Canadian economy is made up from the real estate market itself. If you take a look at it, builders, electricians, plumbers, suppliers, lumber. I mean, it's a finance. I mean, it's a huge, huge industry. And I think the government is really kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place, but yet they have to get real interest rates back up to, quote unquote, normal for the times. And I think all of these pressures that we're there, the rates are, going upwards, but at the same time, I think Ottawa really has to keep an eye on it so that they're not doing it in a detrimental way. So, to see that first 0.5 point increase, the first one, I can't remember, what was it, Sean, like 10 years or longer? They actually, I think it was like 20
over 20 years. Over 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. So, for them to be that aggressive, tells us that they really are almost behind the game, if you will, and are trying to play catch up. So I think what's going on now is we've got that big increase. We won't see another one like that for quite a while, in my opinion, only because we've got to see the ramifications of the last big increase. And, I think it takes a while for statistics to show out through the economy about what that change, really has in the impact of our economy. In terms of people earning and spending money, a wise person, once showed us that the real estate market really depends on people earning and spending money. And, we're seeing the employment rates these days in Canada. What is it now? I think it's in the 5s. I mean, basically in Canada, if you want a job, you've got a job, so we are seeing very high employment. If you want to work, you can. So the economy is strong, and I think the interest rate increases are all really going to be a balancing act. And what will that do in terms of the real estate market? I think was very important question that I think we all want to know is what is that going to do to the real estate economy. And I think it comes down to us as investors with fundamentals. Even before the rate increases, we were seeing parts of the country that just would not make sense on a cash flow basis. So you were really, if you were buying in those areas, you were buying an underperforming asset cash flow wise, crossing your fingers, hoping it would continue to go higher. And, I think the fundamentals of investing, tell us that we shouldn't be doing that. And there's still markets out there, aka Alberta, that, you can find with a good 30-year amortized variable mortgage, a place that cash flows really well. So, I think it's tightening up the market a bit somewhat, and really closing off those markets that weren't performing well, and almost really, slowing those down. I was talking to a banker in BC, and I said, hey, how are things going for you in BC? And he says, you know what, Dan, we've actually had somewhat of a slower 5 to 6 months. The market is, what he would call strong, but nowhere near what the frenzy was, let's say even 12 months ago. So I think certain parts, of the country are seeing a slowdown. But will that really, cause the whole market to stop and come crashing down? I highly doubt it.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you for that. Sean, what's your theory on what rates are going to do to the market?
I was reading about the 0.5% increase for a long time, like everybody else was, so I guess it wasn't unexpected. And been well over 20 some years, but then you look back to COVID, prime was 1.75 before, the bank rate was 1.75 before COVID started, and they slammed it down to 0.25 in a hurry. So we're just getting back up to where it was prior to the COVID kicking in. And I think everybody was pretty happy with what interest rates were back in 2019 when, you get 3.5% mortgages. No one was too upset. Now they are. So, because we went through that little gully and going back up the hill. Most of my clients are still taking variables, so there's still quite a gap depending on your lenders. And fixed, you can still get prime minus, 1.05, 1.1, depending on your bank. So that still puts you at just over 2% versus close to 4% for fixed, 3.75. So you still got 1.5, 1.75 points to catch up to today's fixed rates. So, and in 2 or 3 years, if we do have this recession I've been hearing about that might come into play and rates maybe go down, your variable will go with it, but your fixed won't. So, there's a lot of people read the Economist and stuff on Facebook or internet and see that everybody should lock into a 5-year fixed right now because that's the safest thing to do. And I think all these economists work for the big banks, if I'm not mistaken. So, caveat emptor, as they say. So,
as they say, if a lot of economists are predicting a recession. If a recession shows up, I mean, the classic government recession fighting tool is to lower interest rates. So, I mean, they could be going up, but they also could be coming down. And Andrea, on your end of it, I mean, I think we've all seen a lot of out of province folks showing up in Alberta and buying properties. I know I see it a lot in my practice. I'm sure you must see it in Red Deer. Are you experiencing out of province people buying, and maybe a rate hike will continue to push them our way because you can still buy properties reasonably? What are you seeing from your end?
Well, today I showed 12 houses to somebody who flew out for the day to come to Red Deer because of the price. And we were looking at houses and duplexes under $300,000. And we were still able to find 12. I'm not saying they're the best 12 to see, but we did see at least 3 or 4 quality ones that were move-in ready within their budget. And you know what? They're newer Canadians, came to Toronto, started out there for their first 3 years in Canada, now looking to where can I, go where we can actually own a home rather than just pay rent. And
Yeah.
so this young couple, two young children, brand new baby, that's what they were here for. So, it's a little bit stressful if you're coming to buy a principal residence in one day. But then on the investment side, we're also seeing people from BC, Ontario, and Manitoba. I have 2 Manitoba clients coming out to buy 4-plexes in central Alberta. So there is a lot of multifamily money coming. And I even have a client from Chile, South America.
And I think I certainly am seeing a lot, and you have to think that what we've learned in COVID is driving a little bit of this. And what we've learned in COVID is that people can work remotely. That this is now not some strange concept. And talk to your boss and say, I'd like to work from home a little bit more. They don't look at you like you're crazy. It was what most people did for such a long time during COVID. I know there are big companies who have said categorically, you never have to come back to work if you don't want to. And some companies who have said, we are disposing of all the office space that you used to work in. You pretty much have to work from home if you want to work for this company. On my side, on the law side of things, with the ability to do Zoom meetings, virtual signups, and we have tougher provisions here in Alberta for doing virtual signups, and in terms of having to, what paper do we need? It's still way easier doing a sign up now that we can do virtual ones than it was before. So, for your young couple in Toronto, Andrea, they might, not sure what they do, but they could very easily be folks that can work from home and are saying to themselves, we will never be able to afford a house in Toronto. Let's go someplace that is a nice place and buy one that we can afford and still have a life. So I think there's more and more people who are going to be doing that thanks to COVID. So.
And you're right, Barry. He already works from home. He actually works for the federal government, collecting our tax dollars from you and me. And he said, you know what? There was 2 postings that he could apply to for the same position and do a lateral transfer. Red Deer was one and Lethbridge was the other.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So there you go. So he's looked at it and went, you know what? Nothing wrong with Alberta. Let's go there. Let's have some money left at the end of the month after we make our mortgage payment.
And I think people are looking more and more at that, Barry, because with 2 young children, when you look at how much the federal government gives you in child tax, but the provincial also gives you in child tax benefit, right?
Yes.
And then depending on your income level, you can earn other Alberta rebates. And, looking at what even vehicle insurance costs, the cost of fuel, like he had analyzed all sorts of different metrics as to why they would move across country to come to Alberta.
And it made sense.
It makes sense. Mm-hmm.
So something else to keep in mind here is that interest rates go up and interest rates go down. Now, we've been in a long interest rate slide from about, I would say, the mid 1980s. Interest rates went skyrocketing up in the late 70s and early 80s when the oil price collapsed here in Alberta, the National Energy Plan. Rates were as high as maybe over 20%. But I practiced law in that time period, and a standard 5-year rate for a big chunk of time was 12%. It was 12%, and people bought and sold. Now, you didn't buy as much house, and you didn't, of course, your payments were, relatively large because of the interest rate. But whether interest rates are sky high or whether they're really low, people still buy and sell. They still buy and sell in finance. So I guess what we're looking to see is, which ways, in which direction is it going to be pushed? And I think people are still going to continue to buy here in Alberta for all of the reasons we've just heard about. So, yeah. But that leads us into the next question, and that is working on and getting financing for your creative deals. And particularly we're thinking about if you have entered into an agreement for sale contract and the term is expiring and it's time for you to pay your seller. The seller's going to quit being your bank and you have to find your own new bank. So you got to get a mortgage. If you are a rent-to-own tenant and you're ready to actually buy your home, you've been a tenant 2 or 3 or 4 years, now it's time for you to pay out your rent-to-own, exercise your option. So you got to go and get a mortgage. It's not as easy as falling off a log to get those mortgages for creative financing. So let's chat about what we think the current financial market is like for folks who do need to take out mortgages for their AFS or their RTO. So Sean, why don't you start on that one?
Well, that's a good subject based on our recent discussions we've had with our mutual client. He was in our agreement from sale from 2013. This thing started 9 years in the making. So he's made, I forget how much was it, $50,000 in mortgage pay down over 13 years. So the banks were not willing to count that as equity towards his down payment for a lot of the banks. So we had a heck of a time getting him a mortgage finally for that. So, but conversely, I had another one recently on an agreement for sale that he only had a very short period of AFS and lost my connection there, I think.
Well, back again. You're with us. Yeah.
I find it much easier for people who have an agreement for sale to get rid of it through a rent-owned tenant or a third party or something like that, because the end buyer is not looking for the big mortgage pay down. They're just looking for a rent-owned type of financing, which is set up right. Seems to be a better fit for some banks anyway. So I don't know what Dan's experience is. He's 5 times as long in the business as me, so 5 times as smart probably.
Probably, yeah. Dan exudes smartness, wouldn't you say?
No, I don't think so. Sean, I remember back in the day helping Sean get his mortgages, and he was a very smart guy and built up a beautiful portfolio there. So I wouldn't say that. I just probably have more gray hair from dealing with these banks. But definitely, I think, with the real estate market being the way it's been, just flourishing like crazy, all across Canada, sometimes being in Alberta, we don't see the frenzy that other people have seen. But, my clients in Ontario all talk about that house they bought 4 years ago that's now $250,000 more in value, and their only regret is why couldn't they have bought 4 or 5 of them several years ago when that happened. So all that to say is I think the banks have seen a very robust all you have to do is look at their stock performance over the last 5 years, and the banks have been doing very well. So the appetite, this is where it comes down to the creative side of things, their appetite to do things that are maybe a little bit out of the normal way of doing things. And given that the 2009 Great Recession was caused from fraudulent mortgage activity out of the US, it's only gotten a little bit more difficult to do the creative deals over the last 10 years. And my advice to real estate investors is don't stop doing the creative deals. There's definitely a need for it in the marketplace. All you have to do is adapt and figure out how to make those deals bankable. And like Sean was talking about, find an exit strategy. For me, if I'm running into a situation where the banks just won't finance out of an AFS or something like that, I've got lots of private lenders that will, put the title into my AFS purchaser's name, and then it becomes a refinance, and you don't have the same challenges and problems trying to prove that your $50,000 equity pay down was your down payment. So, just figuring out a little bit of strategy like that about different ways to do it, such that when you're bringing a deal to the bank, it looks and smells and tastes just like a regular old deal that they see all day long, every day. I just closed out a rent to own deal, and it was like an option to purchase agreement whereby, according to the banker that I presented the deal to, it had a brand new offer to purchase contract because we were exercising the option to purchase on that. So it was a brand new purchase and sale agreement. The down payment was, Joe, if he's out there listening, you're the best RTO document guy I know. He had every document under the sun for me to present to the bank to show where the money came from, where it went, and how long it was sitting there for, and where it was being used for. And the bank accepted that as a regular old straightforward purchase with a big deposit that was accumulated up over time. So, it worked out really well. Is that going to be the same for every rent-own deal? No, but, I would say being really well organized and having all your documents and knowing which bank to talk to is going to get your deal done, I guess. So there are ways. It is a bit more challenging in today's world, but, any kind of deal can get done.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we did on this client we talked about earlier. We had to go to a private for a short term to get his name in there, and they were willing to do the mortgage on appraised value, not the amount of money he was going to end up paying the seller. So
yeah, and if you're a private money lender and you got a house worth 600,000, let's say appraised value of 600, why would you not cut a check for 400? Your money is so entirely safe, right? So in some cases, it just makes sense to do that.
Yeah.
All right. So Dan, I want to reiterate how important I think the history of the deal, I guess, is going back to Joe, who had all his paperwork in order and more. The history of the deal, the ability to prove every penny in the deal, perhaps filing a caveat against the title that talks about the fact that you have an interest in the property. Sometimes I think that's important to banks, sometimes not, perhaps. But you have to give the banks a reason to say yes to your deal, and that I agree with Dan, is making the deal look as much like a normal deal as you possibly can. So that I do believe that's key. What about lender attitude? I mean, lenders change policies. It seems like we change socks. And so that's why, folks, you need to work with experienced mortgage brokers like Sean and Dan, who are absolutely up on. It's their business to stay up on what the current lender policy is, because lenders do change policies. They don't, educate every member of the public about what's going on, especially if it's a policy going in the wrong direction from what most people would think. So, Sean, let's get you to tell us a little bit about kind of lender attitude right now. Is there a particular lender attitude, and have they changed any policies recently? And I mean, do they change enough that you really have to pay attention to current policies with current lenders, because different lenders jump in and out of different areas? How does that work for you guys in terms of creative financing?
Well, we had some lenders, when COVID kicked in back in 2020, we had some lenders reduce the number of properties they would lend on in Alberta. And one lender still has that same policy, which is, to me, kind of silly, because Alberta's a hot market. I don't know why they think they're taking a risk, but it just makes it harder if you plan something to work with a certain order of lenders or a particular lender, and they kind of pull the carpet out from under you midway through because you can't get any more properties with them when you expected to get another 2 or something like that. Then it does make it a little frustrating. So that's probably the biggest one on policies that's been a hit on me. I really can't think of anything else that's kicked in. There's probably some minor ones, but I mean, there's 30 or 40 lenders out there that we could deal with if we wanted to, and there is some nice. Not sure what the right term is there, but there's services online that you can sign up to and access that will tell you every policy and every lender and how they apply it and how it works out there. So if you want to know, we'll use Canada Child Benefit 100% on a rental property, or who will use AISH income or things like that.
Right.
That I don't have all those things memorized, so I go to my sources and jog my memory now and then to look at some of that stuff. Every lender has some kind of a niche out there that they're good for a certain type of deal. Some are really good for self-employed or business for self, we call them, and there's stated income programs, and there's a ton of things out there that people don't even realize exist. They think that you work a 9-to-5 job and you're on salary and you get a paycheck and don't own any other properties and maybe have one vehicle payment. Those are those kind of mortgages are pretty easy to do all day in and out. But when they come to you with self-employed and don't pay themselves a whole lot of money, they want to keep it in the company, and they got 3 or 4 rentals and things going on, and some vehicle payments that the company looks after, but they're in their personal name. Now try and sort out that mess and get them a mortgage. So.
Yeah, that's when you gotta know what those policies are, or certainly know where to go to refresh your memory. Dan, what's your take on that?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the banks and their policies and their rules and what they'll do and what they won't do. And before the 2009, economic worldwide recession and the government coming into our industry, I don't think people really realize that before 2010, there was no federal regulation in the banking and finance world. It was, you guys run the banking and, we'll leave you alone. And then, when all of the trouble happened in the US, and of course it went around the world with all of the financial conferences and agreements that were made about how to not structure bad loans. And the federal government sought to regulate the Canadian industry just as much as ever to ensure and make sure and protect Canadians, because they didn't want these things to happen, even though, our country fared the best because we didn't do those kind of aggressive lending policies. We'll talk about it. So all that to say is before, 2009, as a mortgage broker, it was really a sense of really knowing which bank did what. And, in terms of changing the policy, Barry, back then, it was incredible, because the bank would say, oh, we have too much rental in our portfolio, we're going to turn the taps off, which meant change the policy. And there was, next to none, volume required or sought after by that particular bank. So the policies were much, much more volatile. But what happened after, before the 2009 recession, it was all about knowing which bank was doing what, and were they in a lending mode, or were they in a kind of closing off the tap to cut that kind of product out. And when the federal government came in and said, okay, all you big 5 banks, I want you all scrutinizing deals like this, and this. And it really put everybody on the same level playing field. And the threat of being an audit, shutting down the bank if they didn't do it the way that the federal government told them to, really put everybody on the same playing field. So that meant that if you went to Royal Bank, you went to TD Bank, you would get the same answer with relatively the same paperwork. So, that was an interesting change in the marketplace post 2010. And we saw all the changes come on with the stress test and this test and that test. And how did that shake out in the world for us as investors was, very interesting. And, we just adapted. And, to be honest, a lot of the changes really hit that first time home buyer. Joe and Susie buying their first home and having to qualify, at a much higher interest rate for a 5% down mortgage, or, vice versa. And then eventually they put the stress test out for everybody. But chances are, if you were buying investment properties, you had a decent amount of income and not a lot of debt. So, the impact was minimal, but nevertheless still there. But what we saw just recently, so many years, it was every bank was on the same playing field. So, you couldn't say, okay, I'm going to go get 5 from TD Bank. And then I know they don't like it after 5. So then I'm going to go to Royal Bank and do, another 10 with Royal. So we saw that kind of even itself out. But, because all I really do is investment mortgages, I stay on top of the other banks and their policies and their appetites for investment mortgages as well. So the non-mortgage broker banks like National Bank of Canada, we were talking about the Royal Bank of Canada, the CIBC Bank, I wouldn't do my clients service if I didn't know that those other banks where they stood in terms of wanting to take on more investment deals and more portfolio deals. So, I've got contacts at each of those banks that, should we need them and we can't get financing under the regular ones, we can go to those. So, I don't want to make it sound like those other banks are 10 times more aggressive, but all it takes is a couple more rules in terms of, hey, we'll do 10 doors instead of, 5 doors. Well, then all of a sudden my client's getting 4 or 5 more properties. So little nuances like that, come in really handy. And it just means that, knowing your market is key these days. Just recently, we saw another change that come out that, if you had a high net worth individual and they had lots of stocks and bonds and mutual funds, now all of a sudden the banks would say, hey, we realize that you're self-employed, but we see that you have $2 million in your mutual fund account. We're going to approve that deal. And, there was a time when, it didn't matter how many hundreds of thousands you had in your investment account, they wouldn't, make an exception, partly because they just had the federal, OSFI department watching over them. So if they made a change and the government said, hey, I don't think you should have done that, they would get their hands slapped. But I think now, we're seeing a little bit of a relaxation on that. But at the same time, I'm not seeing a huge upswing on the creative strategies. So, it's kind of a hit and miss, but really as, investment mortgage broker, we have to, pull the whole market, not just our 2 or 3 banks that are our favorites.
And folks, I think that's an important point. Honorable and decent mortgage brokers like Sean and Dan will put you into the best mortgage that they can find. The fact that some lender might be paying more to attract financing to them, these guys will put you in the best mortgage, not the one that's best for them, but the one that's best for you. Which you need to be confident that your mortgage broker will treat you that way, and that's the way Sean and Dan will always treat you. I was just thinking about policy changes while we were talking about this, and in the fairly dim and distant past, I recall that Canada Trust, when they were still a separate entity and weren't part of the TD group, Canada Trust was on their own. They announced when things were going badly in Alberta for some reason, I can't remember the time frame, that they were not going to do mortgages on condominiums anymore. The condominium market was out. You wanted to buy a condo market, you were not getting a condo property, you were not getting a mortgage from Canada Trust. And so they were the only bank or trust company that did that. And so lender attitudes and lender policies change and shift. They're like the shifting sands. And so you really need someone who does this full time. You don't need a mortgage broker who's dabbling in it on the weekends and who writes 2 or 3 deals a year. You need guys who do it full time and who are successful at it. And so let's talk about timing. Creative deals. I mean, when we're teaching our focus workshop, when we're doing the rapid cash program, we talk about the fact that creative deals are often more difficult for a bunch of reasons. There's not as many of them around. Lawyers and realtors don't understand them as well. Lenders don't understand them as well. They're tougher here and tougher there. But what we say is when you're doing your analysis, if you can really see the value in your creative deal, that's a reason to do it. And so, we talk about some of those no money down deals. Getting a no money down property is not a good deal if it's not cash flowing, and it isn't going to work for you in your portfolio. Don't be swayed by the fact that you can pick up a property without giving any deposit money. So, we all know the creative side of things can be, more difficult and more time consuming. I mean, I think we know that. Well, I'm not even going to say what we know. Let's talk about the busyness factor for both of you. Sean, we are in a pretty busy real estate market here in Alberta. What's the timeline for you trying to get a borrower approved now? I know they're different, and each case is different, but give us some comment on what it's like for you as a mortgage broker in a very busy market compared to when it's not as busy.
Well, I'm sure you were good when you said there's variables. It's all depends on the borrower. So if they're a solid salaried income person buying their own home, you need a job letter, a couple of pay stubs, and maybe a couple of T4s. There's banks who will send you back a conditional commitment the same day or the next day. You just have to satisfy those conditions. You get approved pretty quick, especially if it doesn't need an appraisal or anything like that. So then there's the other ones where you could be working friggin' seems like months on these deals because there's so much paperwork, and sometimes documents create more documents. I mean, I always tell my clients, and no docs, no talks. So you don't want to start doing things with a client and find out that, as they start feeding you stuff, you find out, oh, you forgot to tell me that you're not really single, you're actually divorced and paying alimony, or things like that pop up, or any number of things that they didn't put on their mortgage application if you don't dig deep enough. So I have a list of documents I always ask for up front, and it's detailed, and sometimes I don't have to send them in, but I need to have them all because sometimes you lead to other questions too about. And the banks have a myriad of ways to check out clients. They Google them and look up on Facebook, and they probably got databases that we don't know about. And I've had some really bizarre, I thought they were bizarre things come back from banks asking me things about clients. And I thought, oh, why would they ask that? But they found out something that either I didn't think about, or the client didn't tell me, or their spidey senses were tingling on the other end. And sometimes a slam dunk mortgage, you bounce it off the rim and it doesn't go in. So one sidebar comment on policies that I didn't think about at the time. So lately, the discount to prime on variable rate mortgages has started to shrink substantially for some lenders. So not only is our prime rate going up, it's now 3.2. Where you used to be able to get, prime minus, on rental properties, prime minus 85 or 90 in some cases. Now you're getting prime minus 25 from the same lender. So the prime rate's going up and your discounts, so you're getting a double hit on some of your mortgage. And I don't know if that's because the banks want to see more fixed rate mortgages, so they shrink the prime to make it a little scarier for you or not. But seen a lot of that happen here recently. So timing, most lenders tell me they need 10 business days after approval to close the deal. So You can get favors and get things a little quicker, especially if they maybe close through a lawyer versus some of the other services. So I always tell people 2 weeks for conditions and 2 weeks for closing. So, 4 weeks from the time you write your offers.
So a nice clean deal with steady employment, a couple of pay stubs, moving in. Those are pretty easy to do and pretty fast, even in a busy market. The more complicated deals always take more time. And I mean, do they? So if we're talking somebody who's looking to do to exit their rent to own and get a mortgage and buy the property, I mean, is that a more time consuming process for them in a busy market now, or is it always time consuming?
Anything out of the box for an underwriter is pretty tough because they're used to the cookie cutter mom and dad deals, right? That's what most of the big bank ones do. They don't see as many as we see out of the box. So it does take longer. I mean, obviously you got to have everything, all your paperwork up front and know the story, and you never want to get a surprise question from a lender that asking you something you didn't know and said, "Hey, I don't know that. I got to go back to the client." So
never looks good.
Because once if they can't go through the file the first time they open it, it goes to the bottom, right, and then it doesn't resurface till you send your new docs in. Then it's got to be recycled, and you got to go through that process a third time. You're really pushing to get things done sometimes. So, and Dan will attest to this. I'm sure he's got lenders that he's got underwriters that'll look after him better than other lenders he doesn't maybe use as much, just like me. And you can get things done at certain banks a lot quicker. So sometimes quick is more important than getting that rock bottom low rate that they saw advertised on the internet. So
relationship in mortgage brokerage is important. If you have a relationship with a bank and with underwriters, I'm not going to say Dan, we're pitching this to you. I'm not going to say they don't follow their rules or don't get what they need, but how does having experience and longevity and a relationship help you as a mortgage broker to get things approved?
That's like, asking for that favor every once in a while. Normal day-to-day operations, you'll submit everything and wait for the queue, which is usually 1 to 2 days. They'll be looking at my client's file and seeing if they can approve it or not. And every once in a while there's that deal that, hey Dan, I need this done in 48 hours or I'm going to lose it, or my other banker said no and I heard you can get it done, can you slip this one in and get it done for me? So in those cases, because of working with these people day in and day out, for many years, they will slip one into the queue, ahead of everybody else just to do a favor. But you don't want to pull that card all the time, because if you're crying wolf all the time, pretty soon, that favor dries up. So, in terms of timing, I think that's where it becomes key. Don't ask your mortgage broker for favors on every single deal you do. Eventually, they will cut you loose if you end up being that investor that every deal is a big fire and turns their whole office upside down. But 10 business days to get your mortgage approved is key. And then like Sean was saying, 10 business days after that to give your lawyer enough time. Once they get instructions. How many times do you get instructions the day before, Barry, and say, "Oh my God, we got to close this tomorrow"? Barry, stay up all night and do it. Because it took so much time, right? So 10 business days is ideal, but yet again, we are in the hottest market in the country right now, in the busiest 3 months. A lot of people don't realize this, but April, May, and June are the 3 busiest months of the year for all people real estate, and so you have to know that seasonality plays a big factor in your timing. And, do you do 10 days commission? If I have somebody that I've set up, like Sean was alluding to, and they've got me every single piece of paper under the sun ahead of time before they wrote that deal, I will tell them, let's go ahead and do financing conditions in 5 days as opposed to 10 days. And they better be prepared and ready to go way ahead of time. And a lot of people are asking me, hey, Dan, my realtor suggests that I go unconditional. I can't have any conditions or I won't win this property. And that's a scary situation when I have to advise my clients. If you go unconditional, here is the ramifications and problems you could potentially run into, and it's my job to make you aware of those. Now, having said that, if the client has, a $800,000 line of credit on their personal house, they've got some extra cash kicking around, a fallback position is necessary. If my client doesn't have a fallback position, a plan B, if it were, then I'm not advising that we go unconditional. But if they do, then we can go in, fix the problem, and then bring it back to a bank, after the fact. So very tough as a mortgage professional to come in and hear your client say, Dan, I have to go unconditional or I won't get the property. What can we do here? Very difficult.
All right. Well, when we're teaching the course, teaching the Rapid Cash program. And by the way, folks, just want you to know, Dan and Sean will both be at our Rapid Cash program in Calgary on May 7th and 8th. We do some financing panels and financing conversation that goes into all of this stuff in great detail. It's invaluable to have mortgage pros like Dan and Sean show up at Rapid Cash. So we appreciate that. So just it's another reason to come to Rapid Cash. All right. So when we're teaching the course, we say to people, if you're looking for financing to exit an AFS or an RTO, we think you should allot double the amount of time for getting that financing in place. So if 2 weeks, if 10 business days is a normal amount of time for a more normal deal, would we say 20 business days is what people should allow for, or should they allow for even more of that? Should they come and see you and have a consult with you in order to get their list of things they have to do or problems they have to overcome? I mean, should they come and see you on May 1 for a May 31st closing and give you a whole month? What kind of timing would you like to see on these creative deals so that you can actually do your job and not rush around and deal with the issues? What do you think, Sean?
I would like them to come to me the day they sign the AFS and they're thinking of closing it out. Maybe you can't close this out on your current situation. So what might have to change for you to buy it yourself if that's your plan on your AFS. So, but when you have an AFS, you have a firm date. It's like just a long closing contract, right? So
sure.
If you're going to close May 31st of 2022, then back up 120 days, which is when most lenders will lock in a rate. Let's start talking about getting all the financing in place, and we got 4 months to get you through and get you approved. Because if stuff hits the fan and the lender you want to go to doesn't approve it for some reason, you got time to move it around. If you wait till the last month before and we run into issues, then it doesn't give us any more options. So I like more well in advance to, if they got an AFS and they're thinking about closing it themselves, and look at all the issues. And it might have to go private, like the one we're talking about, Barry, and the one what Dan mentioned. You might have to go private to get these things done. So it's
all right. So we're going to extend the time out. Consulting's a good idea. Getting started 4 months before allows you to move along and get a rate locked in. Dan, are you similar mind?
For me, it's really investor specific. If I give a laundry list of documents and it shows up in my inbox the next morning, great. But how easy is it to go back 3 years of rent-to-own buyer's bank account and pull up a 90-day history and show me a picture of a bank draft that the rent-to-own buyer gave investor A, and show me front and back of that bank draft, show me the lawyer's trust account that received it, show me where all those funds came from. I mean, if that can't show up the next morning in my inbox, that's going to take a week of running around, paying some bank for extra, bank statement pulling, or, there's a lot of time that goes on like that. So, I like your idea about a consult. If I say, okay, here's the 20 different things I need, go. And if they can get it the next morning, I don't need 1 month. But if it takes them 2 weeks to put that big, huge list together, I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do. I'm waiting. I'm in a holding pattern. So if that deal closes 2 weeks late, it's not my fault.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, there are challenges in financing creative deals. We know that, but I mean, there seems to be always a way to get it done. So it's important that you buy well, that your creative deals are good deals. That they have to cash flow. They have to have value. They have to be good deals on analysis, not just no money down deals. I think we know that lenders change policies and lender attitudes change. So it's important to work with mortgage brokers who are on top of it. And guys who won't BS you either. I mean, if Dan and Sean think you've got trouble on any number of fronts, they will definitely tell you, because trying to work on an impossible deal is it's a time suck for you and for them. But with enough massaging, most creative real estate deals can be financed. So consulting is good. Looking at and talking to guys like Dan and Sean way before you think you need your money is important. It might be important to consult before you buy. Certainly is on the RTO side. We certainly tell our students that they should work and get their tenant talking to an experienced creative financing mortgage broker to make sure that whatever the problem is that's preventing people from buying now is a solvable, fixable problem. And so you can get great coaching from your mortgage professional on how to solve those problems. Well, all right. Donna, any questions, or we must be illuminating people so well that there aren't any questions? Any final words from you, Dan?
No, I just think, as an investor, my recommendation to everyone is to kind of really do your analysis. Probably, if it were me, I'd probably put a little bit of a buffer on my cash flow analysis. And at the same time, I'd really take a look at things if, let's say the cash flow is break even right now. One of the things that we really have to pay attention to is that even though, let's say, real estate prices in Alberta have started to push upward on an upward trend right now, I'm not seeing a huge upward trend on the rental increases. So, all that to say is, a break-even property right now with a little bit of a padding and a buffer on the interest rate spread might be a really well-performing property a year and a half from now. So, I think that's something that we all have to kind of take into account and, analyze before we make that buying decision. So, don't not buy it, I guess, because, the cash flow is break even or it's only $50. Knowing where we're headed is important.
Okay. Sean, last word to you, or is Sean's gone?
I think we lost them. Weird. This is crazy.
You get the last word. So, folks, thanks for showing up. Creative financing is still fun. There's always a way to do the deal. Analyze hard. Make sure you're getting a good deal going in, and that's the key to success. It's you make money when you buy, so buy well, and absolutely talk to folks like Dan and Sean on the financing side, because, man, you got to have guys who know what's going on, who've been down in the investment trenches, and both of these guys have been there. So, Dan, thank you very much. Sean, if you're still listening, thank you guys. We'll see you again, and we'll certainly see you on May 7th and 8th in Calgary for our Rapid Cash event, first event in 3 years, first live event in 3 years. I'm really looking forward to it. So Thanks, Dan, and good night all. Good night, everybody. It is like somebody's taken the blinders off you. This Rapid Cash program is something more than just you show up on a couple of days over a weekend. This program is good even for people who are just starting out, people who just want to take advantage of some opportunities that have come up other than long-term buy and hold. Strategies that we're going to talk about, it's applicable in all markets all across the country. We'll be surrounded by like-minded people. It's an incredibly supportive community. When we say Rapid Cash, we mean get money not in years and years, but in potentially months. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to get started.